Welcome to the new series from Performance Works International, Guest Practices. I'm Jeremy Blain, CEO of Performance Works International, and I'll be running a series of videocasts with special guests who have a story to tell from both business and life experiences. The conversations are designed to explore their journey, uncovering new ideas, innovations, and next practices that we can all learn from and be inspired by. For today's videocast, we welcome Paul Parker, ex-professional footballer, pundit, blogger, coach and social media commentator on all aspects of the game, domestically and internationally. Our discussion revolves around a hot topic in today's political landscape and corporate offices: bias, diversity and inclusion. Paul has fought discrimination throughout his career and brings his experiences and learnings to our conversation. Paul has worked for great leaders such as Alex Ferguson, Sir Bobby Robson and more. During his career, Paul excelled as a footballer with Fulham, QPR, Manchester United and for his country, England. A journey culminating in the 1990 World Cup finals, arguably England's best performance at the competition since '66. Today he is active in the UK, Southeast Asia and wider as a pundit, blogger and coach. His passion for the game has never diminished. Our conversation will explore Paul's journey from being identified as a footballing talent through the difficulties of breaking into the game at professional level, the racism, abuse and challenges he had to deal with on a weekly basis, and, ultimately, how he made it past all of this to the very top of the game at both international and national domestic levels. Hey Paul, welcome. Great to see you again. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Jeremy. Not bad at all.
Great. Well, of course, we first met in Singapore. We're now back in the UK, both locked down for a little while. How's it been going with you?
Now it's fine. Now the football's got going, it's made a difference. Can watch it. I'm actually attending games where I'm working at as well, so that's made a difference. It's not what I'm used to, but the bonus is I'm not stuck in a house anymore.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're all pleased about that. So I've made some introductions about you, and of course we work together on a number of things. We work with leadership teams, we work with high performing teams, but one of the key areas that we work on, of course, is the diversity and inclusion and bias piece that we find in the workplace. And I know as a professional, from the very beginnings, as a kid and working through your career, making it to your first clubs. And then making it to the very top, you've had to tackle this. And we felt between us that this would be a great 15-20 minute discussion to have and to see what we can learn and apply to the workplace as we're going forward, particularly in the current climate. And I have the first question I've got for you really is the obvious one, which is how did you deal at the time, particularly when you were starting as well, with the discrimination that you came across from the terraces and presumably in the locker room?
Well, I'll answer it in a quickish kind of way, is the fact of no one was ever going to take away what I wanted. And anybody who thought they could had actually come up against the wrong person, because it was never going to be about their strength, their size or anything was going to deter me. It was my inner strength and what I wanted to do, what I believed I should be doing and what I was good enough to do. I was going to give it my best to make sure that if I failed, it was down to me not being deemed good enough. No one was ever going to step in my way by threats of violence because of the colour of my skin, verbally abusing me because of the colour of my skin. That was never going to stop me doing it. Never once did I ever show those people that they ever affected me. And I still believe that is always going to be the way to go, is never show weakness, because weakness only adds fuel to the fire. And these people react on the back of that, because same as anything, they're weak-minded.
And, but what you're describing there needs not just kind of handling it in the moment, but it needs a great deal of mental strength, because I imagine there were times where it became a constant. So, what kind of coaching did you give yourself or, those people around you sort of to help you through that and to keep building that strength, keep that foundation of strength?
I would say I didn't really have help from anybody. I had to deal with
Really?
it myself, and the fact of that I had what I deem as good friends, and they're still all around me now because all my major friends are outside of football, and they were school friends. they never once stepped in, and I never expected them to step in because I wouldn't want them affected by it. But I always knew that they were there, and in their own way, they knew what was going on, but there was nothing they could do about it. But it was about me. I knew what my parents had gone through, and I knew I couldn't go to them and show my weakness because they were both strong-minded people, strong characters, worked hard to make sure their 4 children had the best possible. So I was going to let them down by just giving up. No one was going to be allowed to do it. And to be honest, all 4 of us are exactly the same. We're all quite strong-minded, quite opinionated, which people always do notice that way, but it stood us in good stead, and we've never stepped backwards from that moment on of, being kids and turning into adults. We're still the same way. And I think we all believe that's the way to step forward in life, to be perfectly honest, and should never, ever retreat from that.
Well, it sounds like that you've got, and you've had from the very beginning, a great strength to deal with this. So presumably through your career, you've come across different challenges, of course, and in different ways, not just discrimination, but obviously, developing as a professional and all of that. But in terms of you and your ambition to make it to the very top, what did you learn and how did that shape your own approach?
One of the other, could talk about discrimination. The first thing that comes in people's mind is always colour. But on my side of it, there was a certain bit of discrimination about my height. There was concerns about that, and my way of dealing with it was I had to have other strengths, and I always believe in it. And when I see someone, people are prejudging people on their height. That means I'll turn around and look at that person and say, but what other strengths have they got? What strength have they got that the tall person hasn't got? I was very lucky that I was quick. Very lucky as well that I could jump. I was reasonable in the air at certain things. And I wasn't bad, but I was physically quite strong. And the one thing that was in my mind was that no person was ever going to push me over. I was never going to fall on the floor for anybody. If I fell on the floor, I was going to bounce straight up and go back again. And that turned out a good thing for me, because suddenly, every time people talked about Paul Parker playing football, the one word they always used was tenacious. Never gave up. Recovery was good, because I didn't ever want to be beaten by anybody for someone to have excuse to use against me. Yeah, and it was never going to happen. So that's what I kind of built my life around, really. And even now, I look at things and there's things I want to do, and I say to myself, can I do that? I'll ask myself, and I think to myself, I stand a chance. I'd always go in there and believing that I can actually go and succeed. And I think one of the greatest strengths of today's life is communication. I communicate well with people. I think I'm an easy person to get on with. But if I've got an opinion, I would let it out. They might not like it, but I would let it out. But the people who are in and around me know exactly what I'm all about, and know that I would say it. They might cringe initially, might not be happy, but I think the long game, they know that I'm saying it because I believe in what I'm saying. I'm not saying it to hurt anybody. It's just me, and I think it's what I become because of the life I had to go through.
Yeah, so kind of being open and upfront, best policy.
Yeah, in certain ways. There's still times when you have to sometimes do that and bite your tongue. But I think the majority, it doesn't matter. You can be the greatest friends in the world, and there's a reason why you're the greatest friends, because sometimes you can tell them the truth. It's going to hurt, but if you're that great of friends, it'll always get back to where it was previous.
Yeah, that's what they say, isn't it? That's a definition of a really good friend, who can actually have that conversation with you.
Yeah.
And I guess, as you're saying, we do try to be open and upfront in our communications when we relate it to any workplace. But sometimes we catch ourselves not saying the right things. We have to learn from that as well. But we also have to rely on our managers. Maybe a quick kind of supplementary question, and an obvious one, of course, is that you've worked for some of the best leaders, stroke managers, stroke coaches in the business, you know, from Jim Smith through to Sir Alex Ferguson and Sir Bobby Robson at national level. What did they give you in terms of either advice or role modelling that you took with you through the different phases of your career?
If I was to, I'll start from scratch. I would say that, well, it was the first manager, my first real manager, I would say, was the one who gave me my debut, was Malcolm McDonald. He was very young at that time.
Ex-Arsenal, right? The ex-Arsenal captain, yeah.
And centre forward, Newcastle United, where is the God, number 9. But I was in a position in the game, and virtually it affected me, not on the pitch, is when I got in to the dressing room after what I had to endure on the pitch. Thankfully, we won the game, as we always do at that ground. Did always at that ground, I should say. And I kind of get in, and you could see that I was, you know, everything that happened on the pitch had suddenly come after the game. And he virtually just said to me, "What are you going to do?" And I kind of, "What do you mean? What are you going to do? Are you going to get on with it, or are you going to let it affect you?" And I kind of said, "Well, I want to play football." He goes, "So deal with it." There was no arm around the shoulder. There was no, "We can do this, we can try that." It's a case of deal with it. And given when that was, 1981, 82, it was the only way he could go. There was nowhere to go. So it was as simple as that for any player of a different race or anything. That was the only way he could go. Managers could only talk that way, because if they were to go a different way and want to try and speak on your behalf, they was going to hit a wall of their next line, their next tier they had to go to. So it was dog eat dog. So he said a bit to me to question me. I answered him in a positive, what he wanted to hear, and that was done. Jim Smith was a, excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. Yeah. Well, he's my first, I would say, real serious manager, the one where I had to call him boss or gaffer. It was, you know, there was no like with Malcolm and all the ones who followed Malcolm, McDonald at Fulham. It was all first names. Jim Smith was he was a Yorkshireman, South Yorkshireman, Sheffield boy, man boy. And he was, you could just see it. The moment it got there, it was boss. You just knew, you felt it. He had an aura about him. He was very aggressive, but he was really good. He would drop in a few little quips, you know, about which would, if he was managing today, I think he would be the Warren Clark, deemed as a Warren Clark of football in his manner. Anyone who doesn't know Warren Clark is D.L. and Pascoe, which brilliant actor and a great man. I met him on a couple of occasions, and he was a lovely fella. But he reminded me of Jim Smith in D.L. as the way he portrayed him. That detective is brilliant.
Know what you mean?
Jim Smith was just like that, and you know, it's a shame he's gone. Didn't see him enough after I stopped playing, but he was just a good manager, and he made such a difference. He would come and say things to me in which, again, wouldn't work today. Wouldn't work with the players of today, the way they've been made. But it got me. It made a difference to me, because you want to go out there and you want to throw it back at them. Definitely throw it back at them. And he wasn't being anything racist or anything at all. It was just part and parcel of life in the UK at that given time, which I adapted to. I was used to it, and it got on with it. I was working, doing what I loved. Sir Alex Ferguson, again, a completely different kind of manager. You knew the rules when you met him. He didn't give you a book, you just knew it. From the moment you met him, you knew there was just something different. A man who wasn't a big man, but he had an aura. So it tells you that doesn't matter. Size doesn't mean anything. If you've got an aura, people sense it, and that's what he's got. Even up until I last saw him a few months back, he had that. Still had it. Always about that bit that got you a little bit flustered, and you had to really think about what he's going to say, then wait for him to come back, and then you're chilled because he's responded in a calm manner, and you can go on from there. And the players, knew the rules, and when I walked in, they virtually were. I knew myself then that this is completely different to being a Queen's Park Rangers player. You know, I'd gone from a bed and breakfast to a 5-star hotel, and that's how I judged Manchester United and the person who was at the helm.
That's a great metaphor. Yeah.
It's just the way he managed players. Collectively, he would get in there and he'll get it all out there. And again, I say it, but that's when men were men, and we accepted it. If you sulked, he would know it, but the players would know it as well, and they would judge you on the back of that. So you had a choice: get on with it or ship out if you couldn't deal with it. But then he had a way of individually managing you as well. So if he had a go at a player at half time, he wasn't pulling him in a quiet room and don't embarrass him in front of his friends. It wasn't about that. He would come out and say what he saw in that pitch. Very rarely got anything wrong, but he'd wait to see how you would deal with it on the pitch. And then he'll come in after a game and he would virtually tell you how well you done. Slap round the back of the head, an arm round the shoulder, depending who it was. If it was Roy Keane or Paul Ince or Steve Bruce, he'd want to slap you round the head. Other people, it'd be a little bit different, a softer approach, but it'd let them know that they reacted in the manner which he wanted. Man management, I think that's called. Knowing the people who work for you. And then there was Bobby Robson, who worked in a different way. I'm only judging him as an international manager, of course. But he had a way of talking that when things weren't going well, he didn't need to shout. He would raise his voice in a controlled manner like he'd been taught. When he hadn't, it's only of today's managers who are taught, and you can see the ones who talk about it in their pre and post match interviews, the way they are, and they mostly got someone who directs them on how to say it and the manner to say it. Bobby Robson was pure emotion, and he got you in a way that you virtually felt like you had tears sitting in the back of your eyes ready to flood out because you wanted not to let that man down. And that's how it was for me during that period of being under him for England. And you know, one of my regrets, I never had the opportunity to play for him at club level. He could have been different day to day, but he knew how to manage players at international level. He knew that he couldn't go shouting and screaming because you only had them for a short space of time. So he had to comfort blanket them. Everyone had their own little blanket just to make sure you're right. Injuries all right. Are you ready to go and do me a favour, do your country a favour, and not to let yourself down. And that's the way he managed, Jeremy. And it's just something that I will never forget in that sense.
It sounds like you've learned a lot, and relating, in fact, what you've just said to other workplaces, of course, that blend between the focus on the rational, if you like, or your job role, your skill, you know, playing the best game that you can, learning and developing your own skill sets to perform at the highest level, has to mix with a strong emotional side as well, because that's where sometimes that tough love can work, like with Malcolm McDonald. Sometimes you need the and Jim Smith potentially, and sometimes you need the bit of the arm around the shoulder, and sometimes even the compliment that you're doing the right job, going in the right direction, and building those skills. Because if it comes from the right person, like Sir Bobby, like you're explaining, the power that it can have seems extraordinary. That he got to you in that way.
He got to a team. That's what he got to, and it made you want to do a job and a half. He was looking to do more, so maybe he could pat you on the back a little bit more. And that's the difference when you're working for somebody who knows how to manage, who knows how to deal with individuals, but then knows when the individual sometimes needs a little bit of a tap on the bottom in front of the people he's working with to let everyone know that everyone's going to be treated the same. That's what it needs. But it needs then that individual who's had that little bit of a tap to actually understand it and not to take it personally, and not to then start going looking for people to join him and create a problem for management by, you know, looking for excuses that something that he's picking on this and he's picking. At the end of the day, anybody who's in a position of management, is always looking to do well. Because if his team are doing well, that means he's doing well, and the people above him are saying how well he's doing. But then it's up to that manager to actually to let his people know, his team know that they're doing well, and reward them in certain ways, and to let them be aware of what they're doing. And that's down to the individual, the way they want to manage. But he has to be given that chance. He doesn't need individuals trying to kick up because they're not getting what they want. They're not happy because an individual might be getting more than them. If they look at life as individuals, they will see the reason why that individual's getting a bit more, because they might have a lower esteem than what you have as an individual. So they might need that little bit of talking to. So you can't judge everything on what you see. You have to understand that individual and know each other individually as well. And that's one of the biggest problems in today's life at the moment, is that everybody wants what they see as better, what someone else is getting. And they're not understanding that person might need that because they're not as good at their job as what you are.
Yeah, those managers who can practice what you're saying there, being tough on the issues without making it a personal slight or getting at the personality themselves, they're the ones that can bring you forward, because they can be as tough as you like on the actual problem or the business issue or the something that went wrong in the game, for example. But as soon as they start making it personal, it starts to create factions, doesn't it? And put that person in the firing line. They don't want to like it.
But that's what's happening now. And the biggest problem in anything is the employees. That's the biggest problem. Everyone looks at the manager, which is the easiest one to do because he's an individual. He's on his own. He's easy to attack. But I think if you look at it collectively and you look at yourself, groups are stronger than an individual because they're a group. It doesn't mean they're going to win the battle long term, but when you look at it psychologically, they all feel strong. And when people are looking on the outside, they're going to go with them because they say there's more of them against him, so they must be right. I think you find 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work that way, and they're not right. Problem is we don't give it enough time to actually judge the situation, because it's easy to deal with one individual than a group. And that's what's happening. Generally, people are going in masses to situations, and they're winning that battle en masse rather than looking at the individuals and saying, hold on a minute, they're speaking wisely with words. They know they can't do anything physically because they're outnumbered. Just listen to their words. What are they saying that to make me think this group, this gathering, have got it a little bit wrong, and in a way they're bullying the situation on size.
Yeah, and you're so right there, because if you can then bring that whole together and be focused on what your ultimate aim is, then you're all working in the same direction, and you can deal with the different issues that are there. And many of the teams these days, when we look at different workplaces, it's bringing lots of different personalities, cultures, races, genders, you name it, together in that to all perform against what you would consider a core understandable goal. So if we relate, your own journey to that, what 2 or 3 pieces of advice would you give any of those individuals who are committed to actually performing at a high level, but are experiencing some level of discrimination, whatever bias that is, be it race, gender, sexuality, whatever? What advice, based on your own journey, could you give them?
I have to say, with my time, my years of being in my profession, I can say that at this moment in time, is not once I can actually put down and actually come out and say the colour of my skin affected me and what I wanted to do. The only thing I would say that went against me was that issue when I was at Fulham. They was worried about my height. But me being black and being wanting to be a footballer never affected me. And I don't think other people, I never saw anything that made me think that someone was trying to affect my path to where I wanted to go to be perfectly honest. I think that anything, if you're going in there and you're going into somewhere and you're feeling a little bit on your own, you feel that you're a minority, then That's wrong. Don't ever feel that way. Feel you're the same as just imagine peeling yourself down, and no one's any different to what you are. You're in that position because you're deemed good enough to be there. But it's up to you to prove to everybody the reasons why you are good enough. And by doing that, that doesn't mean making yourself isolate yourself because you feel different and stay away and think you can just do the job and then carry on. Engage with people, communicate with people, and you'll suddenly find those people are happy working with you, because more than anything, they suddenly realise it doesn't matter what colour you are or what religion you are, they can trust you, and that you want to work with them. Remember that as well as a minority. You have to maybe first and foremost show that you're willing to work with them. It doesn't work any other way as far as, and you can ask for this, you can make as many things up as you want, you can demand, as what's going on in today's world. But sometimes as a minority, you have to make that first move. You can't expect everyone to come to you. You can't just sit back and feel that everyone should come to you because you're a minority. You can't demand that. No one should be telling you that at all. You should want to get in there and join in. No different to when I turned up at Fulham, no different to when I turned up as Manchester United with one other black player within that squad. I had to communicate. They knew me, but I had to go and make friends, make acquaintances, and then turn those acquaintances into friendships, and then gain the trust that when I played, they were going to trust me because I communicated. If you don't communicate with people, how are they going to trust you in the workplace? They don't know what you're thinking. They haven't got an idea. So one of the things, and I'll say it again, if you feel isolated, you feel a minority, go in there and test it. Go in there and talk and communicate. Go and find out before you start throwing out your negative words, your negative vibes everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it goes back to something that you said first of all, which is, start with mindset, isn't it? Is like have that attitude to do that and then go in and take those actions. There are also in reality going to be things that are just outside of your control. People around you who won't embrace that, who won't welcome that, those initial sort of olive branches and willingness to work together, communicate and so on. So what's the duty of an organisation to create the culture that allows this and brings everybody together, do you think, to help the process?
I'm a person outside looking in because I've never been in that situation. Yeah. So I'm taking a punt. Yeah. It's that an organisation can only do so much. So I look at a football tournament, I would say I walked into, as I said, a 5-star hotel and everything was put in front of me. All the services are put there. But I had to go and join in. I had to go and intermingle. People were watching me to see what was I there for? Was I there to join in and go and join the tables, or was I just there to have my own single room and be on my own, go and play the games, play for myself, and go back to my individual room on my own? I believe everything is with the individual. The people around can only do so much, and then it's up to you. You can't ask that organisation to make friends with another across there. It's impossible. I couldn't go to Sir Alex Ferguson and say, I want to be friends with Mark Hughes, Brian Robson, Steve Bruce, and Brian McClare. I'm not fussed about Peter Schmeichel, Gary Pallister, Dennis Irwin. I want to be friends with them. I can't do that. It's impossible. My whole thing, my aim is to get all these players together. That doesn't mean sit them around and have a big talk and turn around and tell them, I know I'm different to you, so I just want to get on with you. It's going around and talking as a human being and somebody who's actually played football against you, who respects you and who wants to play with you to go and achieve a lot together. And that's what it should be always about first and foremost. There is too much at this moment in time looking as individuals and trying to push people into corners and saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, because you're not allowed to, because you're not going to get any help. I'll tell you what, unless you knock on a door, no one's going to answer it. It's as simple as that.
It's true, and I think from my own experience, having led businesses and managed people, if I had somebody like yourself coming in to the business who is demonstrating this great openness, this will to collaborate and communicate, I would only add to what you've said by there is a duty of care, but from the leader or the manager who's in place there to create that culture and environment that allows that to flourish, that breaks down any of these bias barriers, whatever those bias lenses are, be it gender, sexuality, race, etc. And also to go one step further, if I see that effort being made on one side and I see a constant kind of barrier to that or undesirable behavior, I would absolutely have a duty of care to step in. That would be the due diligence, particularly in organizations these days, because this is so much more top of mind. I think even in your own career, you will have gone through those days where there was a lot of, let's call it banter, which was, on the edge, I think, which over the years have become less and less favorable. And you've got to be more and more careful about that, into more the modern era, into the 90s when you were playing, where this was kind of more top of the agenda. So for other organizations, there is definitely that duty of care at organizational leadership level. But that goes really nicely with what you're saying, is that everybody who is in that situation has to own it as well. And they have to demonstrate those behaviors. Do you agree with that, what I said there?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. So on my part, I think we just have to, on my part, I'd have to say is that when generally talking about it, black people have to understand, and when they go into anywhere, is that they're no different to anyone else. They have to go in there and believe it. They can't feel it. They'll go in there and they will go and serve that company or that business in the best way possible, more than anything for the company and then themselves. That's that is the way to work. And one thing that we have to remember as well, that black people do argue with black people. Black people do have fights with black people. That's the one thing that I think is a topic which doesn't seem to get talked about. It seems like it's dismissed. It's not mentioned. It's that way. It's a life thing. They do clash halls. People don't get on. It's not always the colour of your skin that makes it. It's going to cause the problem. It's just people not getting on because they don't work. And even if you don't work, you don't getting on, you don't have to turn it into anything else. I played football in, 3, 4, 5 clubs, whatever you call it. I talk about the main 3. I didn't clash with players, but if there was an issue with the players, I would still go and do my job for that hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it was on a football pitch or that training session. It doesn't mean that at the end of the day I have to then say, come and sit in my car. I don't really like you, but I'm going to give you a lift home. We just jump in a car or jump on a train and we go our separate ways. But when it comes to work, you're a professional. You get on with it. You don't look for excuses. You don't do anything. And that's the one thing you have to remember, that when you go in there, you've got a duty to, when a company, a business takes you on, a duty to them. And to be honest, if you're that bit older and you've moved on, you've got a duty to your family to do your job properly. Don't look for excuses and use the excuse because of the colour of your skin or your religion why you're not getting on at work. Don't look for excuses, because the moment you start doing that, you're not doing your job properly. That means then if you're not doing your job properly, you're affecting your team. And if your team aren't doing well, that means you're affecting their progression to move on to their next stage. And then you're affecting the manager. So the manager's going to come looking for you. And then the first thing you're going to go and do, you're going to moan and take it personally and call it racist. Look at yourself before you ever go and do it. Make sure you're doing your job properly so people can't call you out. And I'll tell you what, it's amazing. You're doing your job in any team, and I'm lucky that my life has always been about being in a team. And I still believe this, that I never once let my team down. I think if I saw any of my teammates, none of them would question what I put in. And even if I see people who I didn't play with, all of them knew what I was all about, because they knew that Paul Parker was never going to let them down when it comes to something regarding team. And I'm still that now. I still work off an ethos, is that I don't like individuals when they're within a group of people. I want people, everyone, to be together. And If you're an individual sport, you're a different animal, because that means then that you are selfish in a manner that you have to be to take you forward as an individual. It's the only way you can do it. You have to, different mindset, fine. But in theory, it doesn't work for 9 out of 10 people. You work within a team, be it that team might be 2 people, might be 3. My team was about 11 players on the pitch and 3 on the side. Even earlier than that, it was only 1 on the side. That's how old I am.
You know, you reminded me halfway through what you were saying there of something that we must have been having a coffee once, and it really stuck with me with what you said. You said, you know, often it wasn't the colour of my skin that was the problem, it was the colour of my shirt.
Yeah, it was. That was, I mean, I sussed out with Leeds United, because I played there when I was at Fulham. I played there at Queen's Park Rangers, and that's the one I was talking about at the top of what we were doing with Malcolm McDonald. I got absolutely ravaged there, ravaged. If I was in the ring somewhere, I'd have been thrown. It's like being gripped and thrown around as a raggy doll. It was abuse from all the way through, about my skin, about telling me there isn't no black in the Union Jack, everything. And then I go there as a Manchester United player, and I wasn't black anymore. I was called a Mank. I was called a red bee. It was just amazing that they never actually turned and called me all the names they did before. And straight away I realised the hate between Leeds and Manchester United, because it meant the hate was more than the colour of my skin. So really, in theory, that really did make them ignorant people. Really, that's who they are. Majority of them were sheep, as people are. And we have to remember that as well. The people are doing it, who are saying these things and doing it, you can't come out and call them racist, because unless it's tattooed on their foreheads, but they can be ignorant. They can be in that kind of, be a lamb following around, because they're scared. They're scared to make a decision on their own. They won't be their own person. And that's the one thing that's been taken away in today's world, is that people cannot be their own people, Jeremy. You can't make your own conscious decision not to do something, because then you are victimized for, i.e. being a racist, because you're not following what people are doing. You're not following because you don't believe you have to do that, to stand firm with what you believe in. There's nothing wrong with standing firm with what you believe in, but if you don't want to, i.e. if you don't want to kneel down, you don't kneel down if you don't believe in that, but you still stand firm with what's going on in today's world. And that's the bit that's been taken away. You're being judged. We fought many, many years. People had many, many personal battles on battlefields, because we wanted an opinion. Now we've been given an opinion, people want to take it away from you now. That's one of the biggest crimes that's happening in today's world at this moment in time. Everybody wants to be, what's the word I'm looking for here? Everyone wants to be, I've forgotten what it was, is offended. Why are people going out looking to be offended? Why is that now something that people want to do? Why can't you go out and look to find something and say, oh, I'm pleased about that? Why can't we sit and watch telly and get good news? Why are we always looking at negatives? I know things have been bad, but sometimes enough is enough. Let's talk about the good things. Let's talk about real news, other things that have been going on that we need to know about. Something that's going to make people want to watch you and smile. Why have we got so many individuals out there who just want to pile on more misery in people's life by having a go at a government? We were, Jeremy, living in a country where that couldn't and wouldn't happen. And I was against the way that they were running, because they were stopping newspapers writing what they wanted. What I felt like we weren't getting real news. I can understand why they do it now, because I think they're looking after the people and they want to control it and try. And it's wrong in a way, but now I'm quite sure that that country is giving a bit of good news to those people about things and how things are going.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, you know, I think coming back to what you say is that if there's anything that we've learned from recent activities and recent situations in politics, culture, everything that we're seeing at the moment in the news, is that there has to be a balance, and where we've been conditioned maybe to see the negative in certain situations versus the positive, what it feels like now is that more people are aware that we have a duty to break down some of this herd mentality, call out what was deemed at one time acceptable or just what they do versus actually what's right moving forward. And I think it's not something that we can tackle on this call, but it's certainly a positive that it's become top of mind, and that we're all much more aware of what's going on. We're not at a solution yet, we're not there, but the willingness of people to act more positively and to call out much more of the negativity, I think, can only be a good thing for humanity.
Yeah, I totally agree. To be honest, I'm one of them. I'm sitting throughout, and I was looking for good news. Always wanted good news, wanted the right things being said and done. In this moment in time, it hasn't materialised that way. What we saw going on for 2 weekends on the bounce in London, all negative. Didn't need that kind of coverage. I'm a firm believer in that. If you don't give anyone any coverage, you don't give them anything to talk about or give the opportunity for people to bounce off the back of it, it quells. Now, I look at racism today. When I say today, I mean this minute. I look at it 20 years ago. I look at it 10 years ago. I look at it pre-pandemic. And we knew there's problems, but there wasn't anything of any note. And I'm looking at it now, and what's happening now is totally wrong. There is something pushing it, trying to push something now to force something that isn't there, that wasn't there, I should say. There is a lot of good black people, a lot of bad black people. There's a lot of good white people, a lot of bad white people, and so on and so on and so on. We've got to accept that's life, but we don't need people trying to cause a war when there isn't a war. I personally don't want to see black people demanding jobs. I want to see black people, like I did, go and prove themselves and work hard, put themselves in a great position, and then make it so difficult for these people that they're looking at, the ones who are still got that little bit of a grudge, maybe that racism side to them, but I won't say a grudge, or maybe feel they don't want to because of maybe bad parenting from their parents towards them and not educated them on life. I want them to feel, yeah, I'm going to go and make a difference. I'm going to go and do that and open up my business, open it and see what difference that can make. That's what I would like to see. I don't want people getting jobs because they tick a box, because when they walk into that job, the people in that area, that pool of people in that area they'll be working, are not going to respect them because they haven't gotten there for the right reasons. Go and get the stripes on your arms, go and do all the work, and then when you walk in there, you're on the same level as everyone else because you've covered all the bases. And that's the only way to get a job. That is how I become a footballer, because I covered no one could question me being professional. And then once you get in there, then you work hard to push yourself up the ladder. I could have gone easy and accepted being at Fulham. I could have pushed and stayed there, but I needed to move for that club to move forward. They practically told me that, so I had to leave. I got to QPR and clubs come in, Manchester United come in. Did I really want to go? Not really, because I liked it there and I knew they liked me. But again, I was pushed because the new manager coming wanted Paul Parker out because it was going to bring finance. So I went. And that's what can happen if you get in somewhere. Don't just sit there and wait for it, because when you get in there, you'll find it very difficult when you haven't got people's respect because you didn't do it the right manner. And then you'll go further and further. Don't just look to get something because you feel that you were oppressed or something, your people were oppressed. Forget about it. That's history. History is fantastic. History is what's made this country what it is. but we can't. History is what it is, and you can't go back and change it. But you look now, because history is about the reason why where we are now.
And it's good advice for anybody. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter race, culture, gender, sexuality. On one level, it's down to us as individuals to own it, and it's also down to those organisations who are hiring and creating a more inclusive, collaborative culture to create the right environment for those people to flourish and gain those stripes, as you're saying. So, and you did by your journey, and I know that journey, whether you were forced to move or made the choice to move, it's a new opportunity to learn new skills, to do new things, play with different teams, and you're always learning. So to end, because we've covered a lot within this chat, Paul. We've gone from the diversity, inclusion, and discrimination issue. We've gone into leadership. We've gone into a bit of management and performance and ownership of performance, and what's happening right now. If you consider all of that, and particularly your own personal professional journey, have there been any words of wisdom, and from who, of course, that have stuck with you along the way?
There is one, and I think it's been said to me by a few black people along the way. I think maybe one of them might have been my mum, really, but it's always in my way is that they said to me, Paul, if you're going to succeed, you always have to be better than the white man. Have to be better. If you're the same, they're going to win. If you're better, they'll be forced to take you because you're better. And I live and die by that. And that's still here today as it was 45 years ago, most probably, over those, when it was said to me at that time. It's still the same now. You have to go and prove it. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can't expect anything different now. You're not owed anything for anything to be better now. You have to earn it. And that's the way to do it. Don't tell people or demand that people get something without earning the right, because it's not a long-term deal if you haven't earned the right to be there, because you're not going to be in the right frame of mind and suited to it unless you've earned the right, because you need that background, that base, that foundation to do anything in life. And if you haven't earned it or built that foundation, you will be found wanting, and then you'll be looking for excuses to why it hasn't worked out.
And it's interesting with what you're saying. It's quite hard to hear that, actually, in some ways, in what you're saying. And I can understand that 40 years ago, deep discrimination, deep sense of racism, not just in this country, but in other countries. What we're seeing today, and it's society and governments which perhaps have the opportunity now, post-pandemic, post what's happening elsewhere in the world, from a socio-political perspective as well, to create that framework, create that level playing field for people of all races, creeds, colours, sexuality, gender, etc., so that people can flourish. And perhaps you're right, we're not there yet, but all of us have a duty to drive our governments and drive our societies towards that.
Jeremy, there is a way of driving it, but shouting and screaming, it doesn't work. We know that in life, if you shout and scream, we all switch off. But there's a way of talking, being a little bit passive and working things and working it. As when my parents first come here in the late 50s, they come here, and I wouldn't even want to talk about the pain what they went through, but they got through it, and they knocked down barriers, and it's moved on from every decade, every generation. There was barriers being broken down slowly. There was things going on, still moving slowly. Couldn't expect it to go any quicker. The problem is now we've got people now who are demanding it, have got no respect for what their parents may have done, their grandparents and their great-grandparents have done. They're thinking and want it now because someone is dictating them that you should have it now. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't matter if you're all of the same skin. It doesn't work that way. You have to earn the right. And maybe because you're a black skin, brown skin, it's a slower passage, but it will come. maybe not in my time, but it will come. I'm expecting nothing quick. My children and there's no way I would go out there and demand that they have. I'd say, if you get a job, you get a job because you deserve to get a job. I don't want anyone giving them a job just because it's off the back of me, or just for the fact of them knowing somebody and they tick a box. Embarrassing situation to be in. You wouldn't want to be sitting in a room full of people knowing that you're just there as a token.
Well, Paul Parker, I have to say thanks very much for being so open, so honest, and so truthful with what your own journey has been, and with some of the realities that we're dealing with. I'm sure some people listening to this will find that a difficult listen at times, but it's the reality of where we are. And if we're all going to make a decision to get to this brave new world that may or may not be in our lifetime, let's hope so, it's really worth gunning for. And I'd like to thank you very much for joining us, for sharing your stories, sharing your learnings, and giving us some words of wisdom. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry it's more than 20, 30 minutes.
Just slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but well worth it. Thanks very much, Paul. Much appreciated.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you for joining our Guest Practices videocast. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel through the link below, or check out our website to access more in our current series of expert interviews.